We're at the Daytona International Speedway, where there was plenty of action this past weekend.
And, of course, the Daytona 500 kicks off the season officially. It's the Super Bowl for the sport. And, Ned, we're going to try something a little bit differently for this show. We're going to take you through, step by step, all the action leading up to the Daytona 500.
Catching all of the drama.
The chase for stock car racing's crown jewel begins with the twin 125-mile qualifying races. The top 15 finishers in each race advance to the Daytona 500. Dale Earnhardt overcame a black flag early in the race to go on and win the Goody's 300. We'll have all the highlights of this season opening race.
It was possibly the biggest upset in Daytona 500 history. On the last lap, Dale Earnhardt, while leading, cut down a right rear tire. Derricke Cope in second, blew past and on for his very first checkered flag. We'll have all the exciting highlights of the great American race.
Today's show is brought to you by Ford and your Ford dealer. Have you driven a Ford lately? And by Old Milwaukee and Old Milwaukee Light. It doesn't get any better than this. And by Goodyear Eagle Radials, the best-selling performance radials in the world.
Steve, they have a unique way of qualifying here at the Daytona International Speedway for the Daytona 500. Now, the two front spots are determined by the fastest qualifiers. But after that, they have to run in a 125-mile qualifying race to earn a position in the Daytona 500.
There are two 125-mile races, and you've got to finish in the top 15 to advance automatically to the Daytona 500, so there's a lot of pressure and a lot of heartbreak potentially.
Now, there's one other way that you can get in the 500, and that is reverting back to your qualifying speed. If you had a good high qualifying speed, well, then you'll get one of those 10 spots that are remaining, but there's a lot of pressure there. For a wrap-up on the 125 milers, let's go to Randy Pemberton.
The first of the 125 saw Kenny Schrader on the pole. He was looking for his second win in a row in the qualifying races. He was flanked by Darrell Waltrip. Geoff Bodine, Chad Little, and Rob Moroso all started in the back of the pack after they were forced to back up cars because of midweek crashes. Schrader, Waltrip, and Mark Martin blasted away from the field quickly after the drop of the green flag. Both the Hendrick cars of Schrader and Waltrip swapped the lead early on in the 50-lapper. Martin stayed in between the two. But as the front trio continued to dice it up, Geoff Bodine, Richard Petty, and Ricky Rudd all made a run at the leaders. By lap 20, it was a four-car race, and Petty was third. The King would pick off Waltrip for second, and on lap 28, the STP Pontiac, piloted by the sport's all-time winner, was out front. Petty broke away from his challengers as the famous 43 opened up a convincing lead. He hit pit road on lap 42, still leading. Schrader, Martin, and Waltrip all followed suit. The four would take on a splash of fuel to go the final laps. The race off pit road was won by Martin. Ricky Rudd inherited the lead by virtue of not pitting, but he would run out of fuel. Geoff Bodine also attempting to go the distance, then grabbed the top spot. And Bodine, who said he drove a fuel mileage race, crossed the finish line first. At the same time, Kenny Schrader crashed in turn 4, leaving him 7th and having to go to a backup car for the 500.
You wait till the 500 Sunday. We're going to be strong. We're going to be up front. We're going to be fast. We're going to be up there racing with those fellas. They're going to have to catch us Sunday. Yeah. You can take that to the bank.
Okay, as Geoff Bodine continues on his victory lane interviews, of course, the next race, the second 125, are lining up on the racetrack. And like the first race, Kyle Petty also wrecked during a practice session, and he will be starting in the rear of the field. Dale Earnhardt contained the field in the first few laps of the second twin. Only Elliott in his Ford appeared capable of running with Dale's Chevy. But soon their two-car breakaway turned into a five-car freight train with the Oldsmobile, Pontiac, and Oldsmobile of Rick Wilson, Dick Trickle, and Phil Parsons in tow. The draft, obviously alive and well at Daytona, soon created an 8-car pack, all going after Earnhardt. Neil Bonnet wanted to go after Earnhardt, but he had to hit the garage early with a blown engine. As Bonnet started looking toward the 500, Dick Trickle was looking for his first big-time win on the circuit as he moved into the head of the line on lap 22. Earnhardt then fell to 5th behind Trickle, Jimmy Spencer, Terry Labonte, and Phil Parsons. With 13 laps remaining, Mark Stahl brought out the yellow after hitting a wall. Earnhardt hit pit road for tires and gas. Labonte and others followed him in. Trickle led the charge after the green. Without a pit stop, he was going the distance. New tires for Earnhardt and Elliott had them both stalking Trickle, but Elliott would have to maneuver around Jimmy Spencer first, and that held him up. Earnhardt regained the lead with just 3 laps remaining. With 2 to go, Trickle ran out of gas and was bumped into the infield by Bill Elliott. The running order remained the same 1 lap later as Dale Earnhardt captured the second twin 125, followed by Elliott and Jimmy Spencer.
We're happy about it, but, we just wanted to, sort of secure our position in qualifying outside pole. We wanted to win our race, and, that's what it's all about, winning.
Hollywood comes to Daytona Beach, Florida. You're looking at some of the filming of the movie Days of Thunder starring Tom Cruise, and Ned's our new movie star. He's got a role in the film.
Yeah, I can't believe they put me in that thing, Steve. But we need to take a short break, but still to come are highlights of the Goody 300 Busch Grand National Race.
And we'll also have all the highlights from the Daytona 500. Stay with us. Just ahead, the biggest wreck in Busch Grand National history in the Goody's 300. We'll show you the survivors. Elton finished 5th in the Goody's 300 here in Daytona. Now, this garage is nearly empty now, but Ned, early in the Goody's 300, this was an extremely busy place.
Yes, it was, and because of one of the biggest wrecks ever in Busch Grand National competition. Early in the race, took out almost half of the field, but yet it still was a very competitive race, even though half of the field was running. Tommy Kirkman has the highlights.
It was no surprise that Darrell Waltrip put his Lumina on the pole for the Goody's 300. In fact, since 1983, Waltrip has literally owned this track, winning 3 times. But the biggest surprise among the Busch Grand National regulars was Bobby Labonte, who came down here for the first time and put his Penrose Firecracker in the 3rd starting position. Bobby, you have to be pleased.
Yeah, we are. This Penrose Firecracker Oldsmobile is pretty hot, and I just hope it stays up front all day.
When the green flag fell, Jimmy Hensley jumped out to the lead. But it wasn't long before Dale Earnhardt staked his claim to the top spot. Earnhardt's reign was interrupted on lap 14 by the biggest wreck in Busch Grand National history, a $1 million disaster that involved 27 cars.
Brad Peak went down under, I don't know who it was, maybe the Dale Jarrett or whoever was just ahead of him. He lost it. And, I wasn't as lucky as I was in the Busch class. In the qualifier. I got up on the outside. He backed up into me, got me in the wall.
With the field cut in half, Earnhardt and Dale Jarrett were the best of the survivors. Jarrett finally took the point on lap 45 and would lead the event for 32 circuits. Earnhardt later retook the lead, but was quickly black flagged for an oil leak and went a lap down. Earnhardt's misfortune allowed Jarrett, Greg Sachs, and Bobby Labonte to take turns leading the freight train for the next 50 laps. The only other accident of the day occurred when Dick Trickle and Sterling Marlin got together out of turn 4. Trickle found the wall while Marlin took a slide through the infield. A final caution for debris allowed Earnhardt to get his lap back, but he would have to chase Ernie Irvin, Harry Gant, Jimmy Hensley, Bobby Labonte, and Dale Jarrett for a shot at the checkers. With just 30 laps to go, Labonte was Earnhardt's biggest nemesis, but a late gas stop took Labonte out of contention. Sachs, Jarrett, and Gant positioned themselves for a final run at Earnhardt, and Sachs did get by him with 12 laps to go. But Earnhardt came right back 4 circuits later and pushed to the front. Sachs, Jarrett, and Gant made a valiant effort to chase down the man in black. Jarrett finally ran out of gas with 1 lap remaining, and Sachs and Gant could do nothing with Dale Earnhardt as he picked up his 3rd Goody's 300 win.
Dale, that black flag there midway through the race had to scare you, but you didn't let it bother you too bad.
Well, you didn't hear him on the radio. That was pretty exciting. The guys worked hard and did a good job with the car. And, Spinny Glenn and all the boys back home did a good job with the engine. So we had a pretty good day other than that leaking oil line.
The last 2 years, the guy that won the Saturday race won Sunday. You think that's an omen?
That's what we're working on right now. We're going to work on it right now.
We told you at the top of the show that we're going to capture all the drama step by step. So we'll see if Dale Earnhardt can make that come true in just a few moments.
Well, Steve, it's time now for the mailbox. And our first question comes from Dustin Mathis of Cumming, Georgia. Dustin writes, how often is a Winston Cup driver required to take a physical examination and renew their NASCAR license? Well, Dustin, for that answer, we'll go to Brett Bodine, who drives the Quaker State Buick.
Well, thanks for writing in, Dustin. That's a good question. We have to take a physical exam once a year here at Daytona for NASCAR before we are able to compete at Daytona. Our license is renewed once a year during the off season, and but if we were to get in an accident during the year, of course we have to pass a doctor's test and get reinstated by NASCAR.
Ned, our second letter today comes from Reed Johnson, and he's from Dalton, Georgia. He writes, what do shock travel indicators show you? Reed, for that answer, we'll go to Sandy Jones, who works on the Tide Chevrolets that Darrell Waltrip drives.
Well, that's a very good question, Reed, and thanks for writing in. To show you what we mean by a shock indicator is we've got a tie wrap on the shock absorber. And when we push it all the way up, and when the car comes out onto the racetrack and goes into the corner, it pushes this shock indicator downward by compressing the shock. And that'll tell us whether we need a stiffer shock or a stiffer spring. And thanks for writing in.
If your question is used in an upcoming episode of Inside Winston Cup Racing, you will receive an Inside Winston Cup Racing cap and sweatshirt. All gifts courtesy of Sports Image Incorporated of Charlotte, North Carolina. If you would like to purchase an Inside Winston Cup Racing cap, sweatshirt, or t-shirt, call our sports club number, 1-800-692-7777. Credit cards only, please. Send your mailbox questions to Mailbox, Inside Winston Cup Racing, P.O. Box 240417, Charlotte, North Carolina, 28224.
Well, Steve, as Dale Earnhardt leans up against the Goodwrench Chevrolet that put him in victory lane in the Goody's 300 Busch Grand National race, we'll find out after we take a break if he was able to get a similar Chevrolet into victory lane in the Daytona 500.
And Randy will catch us up on all the latest news, but first, a few words from one of Dale Earnhardt's all-star pit crew members.
Hi, I'm Jody Davis, catcher of the Atlanta Braves, a big race fan, a big Dale Earnhardt fan. Stay tuned for more Inside Winston Cup Racing.
Next week here on Inside Winston Cup Racing, we'll head off for the second race on the 29-race Winston Cup schedule as we bring you all the exciting action from the Pontiac 400 in Richmond, Virginia.
The Busch Grand National cars were also at Paul Sawyer's three-quarter-mile oval. We'll bring you all the excitement of the Pontiac 200.
And we'll take you along on one team's futile effort to line their car up on the starting grid for the Great American Race as we follow the Mickey Gibbs team through speedweeks.
Well, Steve, Dale Earnhardt came awfully close to putting that Goodwrench Chevrolet into victory lane for the second day in a row. He got within a half a mile.
Derricke Cope pulled off an incredible upset here at Daytona, but Dale dominated this race, Ned, as never before. He led over three-quarters of this 200-lap event.
Well, he really put it on him, no question about that. For a wrap-up of the highlights of the Daytona 500 as well as the other news, let's go to Randy Pemberton.
On the sponsorship scene heading into the Daytona 500, Lake Speed has finally secured a deal, but it's only a one-race deal just for the Daytona 500. Also, Greg Sachs has worked out a program with Rick Hendrick. Sachs will drive in 10 to 15 races under the Hendrick banner. One other sponsorship note, Dave Marcus has secured a sponsor for 6 races in Mike's Big Apple Mart. Let's talk just a moment about some of the drivers who had a little trouble here during Speed Weeks. Kyle Petty was one. He had to go to a backup car as he crashed his original car during practice sessions. Also, Brett Bodine had to go to a backup car, as well as Rob Moroso. Another driver, Hut Strickland, who crashed in the final lap with Kenny Schrader in the first Twin 125, only his fortunes turned a little bit as Rick Hendrick has offered him a car to ride in the 500. Well, let's set the Rookie of the Year crop for the 1990 season. Jack Pennington, as well as Jerry O'Neill, will try to upset Rob Moroso for that year-end award.
Today's Winston Cup highlights are brought to you by Ford and your Ford dealer. Have you driven a Ford lately?
The Great American Race actually started about 7 a.m. here in the garage area on Sunday morning. A lot of the teams arrived here with questions in their mind. That's because a pelting rain on Saturday night washed all the rubber off the racetrack, and that meant possible chassis changes. Well, a lot of the teams made those changes, but they wouldn't know if those changes were right until they dropped the green flag. But one team that made no changes, they said they were right from the beginning. That's the team of Dale Earnhardt's. With pole winner Ken Schrader starting at the back of the field, the question was, would Dale Earnhardt, odds-on favorite to win his first Daytona 500, have any close competition in the early going? The answer was no. The three-time Winston Cup champion held off all challengers, but by lap 24, Earnhardt did have some company. Schrader had miraculously made it from the rear of the field to Earnhardt's back bumper. The travesty of the race, which drew a crowd upwards of 150,000 fans, came when seven-time Winston Cup champion Richard Petty lost his STP Pontiac as he cut down a right rear tire. The King's chance to claim an unprecedented 8th Daytona 500 was over. After the caution, Earnhardt continued his run out front, but by lap 40, he was getting some pressure from Schrader and Bill Elliott. On lap 41, Phil Parsons, Rob Moroso, Mike Alexander, and Alan Kowicki all ended up sliding through the infield. All but Kowicki would retire early. 5 laps after the restart, Earnhardt had gone from 9th to 1st. It looked like there was no stopping him, particularly if you thought Ken Schrader would do it. Just past the quarter pole, Schrader lost power in his Chevrolet Lumina, and he was done for the day.
Yeah, something just let go. We were due. Wanted to let go.
Still out front, Earnhardt looked like a sure bet to win the $10,000 Gillette Halfway Challenge, but gas mileage may have been the only thing he lacked. Harry Gant was the last of the front runners to pit, and he crossed the stripe first as he headed down pit road for fuel. After all the stops were completed, the 143 laps of green flag racing continued. Earnhardt was still without a challenger, as he opened up as much as a 1-mile lead over the competition. But running second in the Daytona 500 is no small feat either, and second most of the day belonged to young Derricke Cope of Spanaway, Washington. Cope nor the others had anything for Dale Earnhardt's Goodwrench Chevrolet, but the fastest car doesn't always win, and Derricke Cope had a date with destiny. With just 7 circuits remaining, Geoff Bodine, solidly implanted in 3rd, ended up spinning, bringing out the final caution. With fresh rubber for Earnhardt, surely he would go back to the front. He did, and it was all over but the celebration. But on the final lap heading into turn 3, Earnhardt cut down a tire, and Derricke Cope dove to the inside. Cope's date with destiny was suddenly a reality as Derricke Cope marched on to win the biggest race of them all, the Daytona 500.
We were racing for second. I mean, that's all there was. Dale was just too tough today. I come around, took the white flag, and Labonte tried me on the low side over there, and he wasn't strong enough to get me. I knew that, so I figured if I just tucked in with Dale, I could have second. And I figured second's a lot better payday than 3rd, so I just stuck my nose right there, and coming down there, I knew that Labonte, he moved another again, he couldn't do nothing, so I got ready to go in turn 3, and lo and behold, I just saw a tire start shredding, and I heard his noise, and the car turned sideways, and I drove to the bottom side, I went by him, and I looked back, and I figured, there's no way they're going to catch me, and I come around to make sure I was a checkered flag, and I started yelling.
Ned, the 32nd annual Daytona 500 is in the books, and what a way for Derricke Cope to pick up his first ever Winston Cup victory.
And what a way to start the NASCAR Winston Cup season. Well, our time's up for today. Hope you enjoyed the show, and you be sure to be with us here next week on TMN.
Today's show has been brought to you by